The timestamp on this video is May 2024. I've written 3 HTML utilities to program a Solis battery charger. The Agile Pricing here is relevant to the UK market. These utilities can be copied and should be installed on your own web server. You will need to edit the third utility to enter your own private keys and secrets for the API. The first utility, which I call agilePrices.html, uses code from Octopus to display the latest prices. You can alter this script to more accurately get the prices for your own region. Here, these are for Southern England. The 3 lowest prices are highlighted for convenience, and you can click on the X next to the times to group your preferred charge times. And there are 3 time groups, as I'm sure you know. Each time group should be contiguous, and when you're done, you press Program Batteries. So I'm going to set 12:30 through 1 o'clock to 1:30 as my first set, and then I'll set 3 o'clock to 3:30 as my second set, and I won't bother with the third. This second utility simply takes in the information you typed in the first utility and populates this table and the drop-down menus. In my example here, I just set the default charge currents to be 20, 10 and 5 for the 3 different charge times. What this utility will do is add 1 minute to the start time and subtract 1 minute from the end times. And the password you type in here is your Solis user password. And this will get passed to the third script. So, just as an example, I will change the second current to 15. When I press send, this will send the information to the third script. Your other Solis information, the API information, is going to be hard-coded in the third utility. Once the third utility is finished, look at the Solis app, inverter control, work mode, self-use mode on the charge and discharge line. Press view. Okay. So here's the inverter control on my Solis inverter. This is the so-called plant name, station name they call it. And this is relevant to the time use mode, self-use mode, under work mode. When you click on charge and discharge times view, you'll see the times you entered in the utilities. So this is the code for the third utility, which does all the heavy lifting, taking the string of currents, start and end times, and sending them to the Solis Cloud API. You will need to edit this file to enter your information. The first bit of information you need to enter is the key ID and your key secret. I've obviously changed these. This is your Solis username. This is the name of your inverter, as you see on the Solis Cloud application. And the password is passed in from the previous utility. If you don't like that, you can hard code it in here and uncomment this line. The charge times string is sent in from the previous utility. If you want lots of output from your Solis inverter, just set this value to true. And here's an example of the string that comes in from the second utility. Again, nothing stopping you just putting this straight in this utility here. In this example here, this 30 is the charge current, the discharge current, the charge time for the first set of charging, the stop time, the discharge start time, the discharge stop time, and then this is the second set of charging and discharge times, 40 amps, 0 discharge current, 10:30 to 11 o'clock, and in this example, nothing is set for the third time. And that's all you need to edit. Just going through the code here. It's done in 3 parts. The first part uses this API, the inverter list API, and it takes the station name, in my case pylon battery, and it pulls out the ID of the inverter. So it does a bit of CURL and gets a JSON response from the inverter. From that, it digs out the ID of the inverter. That gets passed to the third API. The second API, which is called, uses your username and password, suitably encoded, and this is this API, v2 API login. Basically the same thing here. Sends the data to the inverter through CURL, pulls off the JSON response, and digs out this token called CSRF token, which I store in this thing called $token. The third part uses the v2 API control API call, and that takes the inverter string, which you got from the first API call, adds in this CID, it was presumably some Solis identification for this particular control, and then sends in the string of charge times, which is a bit like that from above. It's the same CURL, except that in the header you have the token for the login. Sends that to the API and gets a response. The response will just be a whole pile of information which will give you an idea of whether it worked or not. And that's it. That you should always check your Solis screen to make sure that this data went through okay. Probably to start with, you need to set the debug flag to true, just to return all these JSON strings, which are interesting to look at. When the debug flag is set to false, you'll get this output, which is just that. Just a couple of notes. The API calls are specific to the self-use mode in the Solis Battery Charger. And these APIs work now, but they are a work in progress. So there's no real guarantee they will keep things consistent. So just to recap, these are 3 utilities. You can run the third one by itself, as long as you put in the correct strings, or you can use all 3, which just makes things a little easier. They do need to be run on your own web server that will allow PHP code. And you really should be familiar with HTML, JavaScript, and PHP if you're going to make any alterations. You'll note that I only set the charge times with these 3 utilities. If you are a programmer, you can alter the second utility to complete the string of charge and discharge currents and times. These utilities should be in the description below. And I do want to thank this chap Steve Gall at GitHub and Adam Cable for some of the initial API code and PHP code that I used.